You know, that feeling, that deep frustration when a potentially brilliant idea, maybe a real game changer for innovation, just seems to fizzle out in a team.
Yeah, it's like, it's not even that the idea itself was bad.
Exactly. It feels like there's this invisible force, something lurking below the surface, just holding things back. And here's the really surprising part we found in the sources. Our emotional states, like the actual feelings within the team, are absolutely critical to this. And believe it or not, AI might actually be starting to help us see it.
Hmm, interesting connection.
So today, that's exactly what we're taking a deep dive into. We're going to unpack how the emotional climate within teams, the foundational health of your whole organization, and even what you think is agile product and service management. How all that impacts your success, especially when you're trying to bring in something as complex and frankly transformative as AI.
Right. It's all connected.
Yeah, and we've been digging through a whole stack of material for this one. We've got sources that give us some really surprising insights from AI about team feelings, others that get super real about what Agile actually means for product and service management, beyond just the buzzwords.
Hmm.
Plus, stuff exploring those hidden pillars that truly support strong organizations and how leaders, navigate all that immense pressure and uncertainty.
And our mission, really, in this deep dive is to pull out the most important nuggets from all of that research. We want to give you, the listener, a kind of shortcut to understanding the real drivers, some obvious, some maybe not so obvious, of team creativity, effective collaboration, and resilience in this really fast-changing world.
Especially as AI becomes a bigger and bigger part of how we build and manage products and services.
Exactly. That's the key context here.
Okay, so let's unpack this then. One of the most powerful concepts that jumped out from the material we reviewed is this idea of a critical emotional threshold. There's a model mentioned, the mood elevator, and it really highlights curious and interested as this absolute pivotal point.
Right. Think of it like the ground level. It's sort of the state of potential. You're not necessarily feeling, ecstatic or intensely positive, but you're not negative either. You're just open.
Open.
Your mind is receptive. You could genuinely go up from there into more positive states, or you could slip down. It's that really crucial point of choice and possibility.
So what happens then, according to this perspective, when you're operating above that curious and interested level?
Ah, well, this is where the magic really happens for teams. The sources describe three categories of these really powerful states.
Mhm.
First, you've got the states of personal fulfillment feelings like gratitude, hope, appreciation, maybe even humor. These fuel that intrinsic motivation. They make people want to contribute, bring their best energy.
Okay, that makes sense.
Second are the value creation states, things like being wise, creative, resourceful. This is the zone where true innovation lives. You know, where teams don't just solve the obvious problems, but actually uncover new opportunities for their products or services.
Right, the real breakthroughs.
Exactly. And third are what they call the enabler states, flexible and patient. These are just essential for navigating complexity, allowing ideas the time they need to develop, and staying adaptable when things inevitably change. When you're above curious, you're really listening to understand. You're asking better, deeper questions, giving constructive feedback, and you're genuinely co-creating solutions.
Got it. So that's definitely the zone you want your product and service teams to be in, especially if they're tackling something new and complex like AI. What's the flip side? What happens if you dip below that threshold, heading into what the sources call the basement?
Yeah, the basement. The moment you slip below curious, your mind effectively starts to close. You stop genuinely hearing what others are saying, new information struggles to get in, and you basically get stuck in your own internal loop. The sources sort of lay out the levels in this basement. Initially, you might see warning signs, like impatience, or maybe worry, those subtle cues that something's a bit off.
Just little things at first.
Right. But if those aren't noticed or addressed, you hit what they call the performance blockers.
Yeah.
Irritation, defensiveness, judgment, anger. Collaboration essentially just dies here because people are so consumed by their own internal state, they're not really present with each other. Forget innovation.
Yeah, impossible then.
And then at the very bottom, you find states like stressed, overwhelmed, depressed. This isn't just feeling bad. It actively drains energy, creates these negative spirals, and leads directly to burnout. Work becomes something you just have to endure, not something you contribute to or help shape.
That sounds grim.
It is. And the material also points out the physical cues that often go along with this. Dips things like tension in your body, maybe shallow breathing, shorter or snippy replies in conversations, that urge to interrupt people.
Oh, I recognize that one.
Right. Or even just that heavy feeling of, oh, here we go again. These are your body and your behavior basically signaling, hey, you've gone below curious.
Okay, now here's where it gets really, really interesting for me. The sources make a direct link between this whole emotional threshold idea and how we interact with AI. AI obviously doesn't have emotions.
Right.
So if a team is operating below curious, maybe they're feeling defensive or frustrated or anxious, they are much, much more likely to misinterpret or misapply or simply mistrust the output they get from AI systems.
That makes sense. Your lens is skewed.
Totally. And here's a worrying part. If they're operating from a place of, let's say, unexamined bias while they're below this threshold, they might inadvertently amplify and feed that bias right back into the AI's future interactions or the data it learns from.
That's such a critical point. Staying above curious fosters the kind of emotional intelligence and that open mindset you really need to guide AI wisely, to make sure it actually extends human capability rather than just, magnifying existing dysfunction or negative patterns.
Yeah, guiding it wisely. I like that.
And what's also fascinating here is that these emotional states, they aren't just contained within individuals, they're contagious. One perspective shared in the material is that emotions literally spread like viruses within a team. They call it emotional contagion.
Like a virus. Wow.
Yeah. If even just one person is consistently operating below, curious, maybe they're disengaged, anxious, defensive, it can actually drag the entire team's tone and energy down surprisingly quickly. We're talking days, sometimes even just minutes, for that shift to start happening.
And the speed is startling, right?
Right.
And the material mentions something about small teams.
Yes, exactly. It suggests that in a team of just 5 people, an emotional downturn can cascade and become pretty pervasive in only 3 to 5 days.
That's fast.
It is. But there is good news. The reverse is also true. A single team member who is genuinely operating in those elevated states, above curious, can actually start to shift the team dynamic back upwards. One person can make a difference.
That's encouraging.
And this contagion effect is particularly significant when we talk about leadership. A leader's emotional state doesn't just affect them. It truly ripples out. It impacts team performance, their ability to focus, and critically, their capacity for innovation and creativity in product and service management.
Huge leverage there.
Huge. The research really emphasizes that maintaining a stable, regulated emotional perspective is key for leaders. Just trying to suppress or ignore emotions, putting on a tough face, is actually counterproductive. Neuroscience shows you can't just switch off feelings. The goal isn't suppression, it's regulation, bringing emotions into balance so they don't hijack your capacity or the team's.
Regulation, not suppression. Got it.
Yeah. And one source even raised this interesting, slightly concerning thought. That with the rise of AI, there might be this implicit, maybe problematic expectation that humans should somehow adopt that same kind of unemotional response, which is, well, both impossible and probably undesirable.
Right, we're not machines.
Exactly. And this actually brings us to where AI can start to help by maybe illuminating some of these dynamics that are often unseen or hard to pin down. AI is starting to reshape how we understand team health, not by just tracking clicks or tasks completed, but through expert pattern recognition in how teams communicate.
How so?
Well, it can track things like the tone used in messages, the timing of responses between team members, overall engagement patterns, and it can spot potential dips in team energy or mood before they become really obvious to the humans involved.
Right. The material pointed out AI sentiment analysis used thoughtfully isn't just about superficial productivity numbers. It can flag moments of potential emotional decline by identifying signals like, what were they? Consistently longer response times in team comms.
Yeah, or a noticeable drop in the number of questions being asked, maybe a shrinking vocabulary used in discussions, increases in error rates, or even subtle dips in the overall quality of work being produced.
So these aren't just productivity metrics in isolation.
No, they're often symptoms. Symptoms of an underlying emotional dip or an engagement issue that needs attention.
What's fascinating there is how AI might surface hidden patterns.
Yeah.
Potential risks or even opportunities related to team dynamics that human teams might just miss in the day-to-day rush. It connects surprisingly to that concept of organizational mindfulness, doesn't it? If it's guided properly.
It really does. But, and this is a big, but AI doesn't have human context. It sees patterns, but it doesn't understand why they're happening.
Okay, so that's the limitation.
Exactly. This is where the real power lies in a human-AI partnership. The AI can monitor aggregated communication patterns across the team, importantly, not the content of individual messages, but the patterns specifically looking for shifts that indicate a team-wide change in mood or energy. It can then alert a leader, or maybe the team itself, to these potential shifts.
And then the humans step in.
Precisely. Then the humans bring the essential meaning and context. If an AI flags, say, a dip in team energy during a specific sprint planning session for a product, a human leader or team member can ask, okay, what's going on here? Is this about that technical debt we keep ignoring? Is it unclear priorities for the next sprint? Is there anxiety about that upcoming deadline? And crucially, they can act.
Act how? Big interventions.
Not necessarily. The sources suggest these don't need to be massive things. Sometimes it's those light-touch, high-impact nudges. Pausing a meeting that's going off the rails, suggesting a brief break, offering needed clarity on a goal, or sometimes just sincerely expressing appreciation for the team's effort. These small actions, informed by that AI signal, can really reshape dynamics.
And privacy is obviously a big concern here.
Absolutely. The material is very clear on this, stressing that the most ethical and effective systems focus on tracking aggregate, team-wide trends, often with explicit opt-in from the team. And the goal is always to provide supportive insights, not individual surveillance. Support, not spying.
Right. Crucial distinction. Okay, let's unpack this a bit more. These team dynamics and emotional patterns we've been discussing, they aren't just superficial issues you can fix with, like a quick team-building exercise, are they?
Not at all. The sources connect them really deeply to the fundamental health and structure of the entire organization, especially with the speed of change today and the complexity of integrating AI into product and service management. The material emphasizes this absolute necessity of building on solid bedrock, not on shifting sand.
Bedrock, not sand. I like that analogy.
Yeah, and they highlight 4 core pillars that form this essential bedrock foundation.
Okay, what are they?
They are context, mindfulness, respect, and trust. And the key thing is they're interdependent. They don't exist in isolation. A weakness in one pillar tends to undermine the others, but together they create that solid structure you need to thrive, especially during change.
Okay, let's break those down. First one, context.
Right. Context. This isn't just about knowing your individual tasks for the day. It's about a deep, shared understanding across the entire team of the why. Why does this product or service actually matter? What core problem are we trying to solve for the customer? Why is this specific AI feature important in the grand scheme of things?
So bigger picture.
Exactly. In agile product and service management, this shared purpose, this context is absolutely critical for alignment, for making effective decentralized decisions, and for building that common pool of knowledge the team draws on.
And how does AI play into this?
Well, with AI, unclear context gets amplified dramatically. If the team isn't clear on the why, the AI output is likely to miss the mark, leading to wasted effort or even costly mistakes down the line. One source made a really compelling point. Often the limits of AI reflect our own human limits in clearly articulating the why. Context provides that essential alignment for both the humans and the AI systems we're trying to work with effectively.
Interesting. Okay, pillar number 2, mindfulness. This isn't just meditation, right?
No, not necessarily, although that can help some people. In this organizational context, it's more about cultivating a state of being fully present and aware. It's about noticing the subtle signals and interactions between team members, in the work itself, in the team's overall energy levels. Things that are really easy to overlook when you're just rushing through tasks on autopilot.
Being present and aware.
Exactly. In agile product and service management, this heightened awareness helps teams navigate complexity much better. It makes them more attuned to the dynamic needs of the team and the product. It fosters stronger relationships and allows for deeper insights into the real challenges and opportunities in their product or service domain.
And AI's role here.
AI makes mindfulness even more critical in a couple of ways. First, just thinking about the significant ethical and societal implications of deploying AI at scale. We must be consciously present to these potential impacts as we build products.
That's a big responsibility.
It is. And second, somewhat paradoxically, AI can actually support mindfulness. If guided properly, it can surface patterns or insights we might otherwise miss, helping us become more aware of what's really happening within the system or the team.
Okay. Pillar 3, respect. What does that mean in this context?
Again, this goes way beyond just being polite. It's about actively building a culture of psychological safety, A place where people genuinely feel safe to contribute ideas, even half-baked ones, to voice concerns, or importantly, to admit mistakes without fear of blame or reprisal.
Psychological safety, right.
Valuing diverse perspectives is just paramount in good product and service work. Without respect and that safety, teams start to hide problems. This leads to what one source called watermelon metrics. Everything looks green and healthy on the surface in the reports,
But underneath.
but underneath it's actually red and troubled. The sources frame avoiding reality like this as a form of deep disrespect to the team's capability to actually solve those problems if they were brought into the open.
Avoiding reality as disrespect. That's powerful.
And when we think about integrating AI, this concept of respect extends naturally to how we design and use these systems ethically. Ensuring transparency, fairness, accountability, these are all expressions of respect within the product or service being built.
Makes sense. And the final pillar, trust.
Trust. The material describes this as the most foundational pillar of all. It's the essential glue holding everything else together.
The bedrock of the bedrock.
Kind of, yeah. Trust truly is the foundation. In the context of agile product and service management, it's what empowers teams to really embrace change, to experiment safely without fear of failure being punished, and ultimately to achieve ambitious results. Without trust, the adaptive, self-organizing nature of real agile simply cannot function effectively. It just breaks down.
And for AI adoption.
Absolutely crucial. Users need to trust the AI systems they're interacting with in the product. And maybe even more importantly, team members need to trust each other to navigate the challenges and the inevitable uncertainties that AI development presents.
Is it blind trust, though?
No, definitely not. The sources emphasize trust, but verify. Meaning trust is built through consistent, transparent actions over time, but healthy systems also have appropriate checks and balances in place. And critically, trust doesn't just appear out of thin air. It grows organically when those other three pillars, context, mindfulness, and respect, are strong and actively nurtured.
Okay, that framework of the 4 pillars, context, mindfulness, respect, trust, really helps connect the dots. This brings us then to a crucial distinction that came up repeatedly in the sources. Given all this talk about foundations and agility, are you really agile in your product and service management approach, or is it something the sources bluntly call agile theater?
Ooh, yeah. That distinction is absolutely key. It helps explain why so many so-called agile transformations, frankly, fail or fizzle out. The sources draw this really clear line between doing agile, which just means implementing the practices, the ceremonies like stand-ups and retros, checking the boxes for your product work.
The motion.
Exactly, the motions, versus being agile, which is about truly embodying the flexible mindset, the deep collaboration, being driven by the underlying principles, not just the rules.
And agile theater is just doing agile.
Pretty much. Fake agile or agile theater often comes from what's described as agile acquisition rather than true adoption. Organizations go out, they hire trainers, they teach the practices, which is actually the easy part, but they don't fundamentally change the deeper mindset or the underlying organizational culture and structures.
So what are the red flags then? What does this fake agile approach actually look like in practice for product and service management teams?
Well, ironically, it often looks surprisingly rigid, despite having agile slapped on it. It can become overly process-heavy. Teams get rigidly attached to specific frameworks, treating them like strict recipes that must be followed exactly letter by letter. Rather than seeing them as flexible guides, you adapt to your specific product environment and team needs.
So it looks agile, but it's actually the opposite.
Precisely. This attempt to look agile on the surface ironically creates something completely inflexible, and it absolutely does not lead to genuine business agility or better product outcomes. It's just theater.
So what are some specific telltale signs the sources point out that might indicate you're in agile theater?
Okay, well, one big one is this unyielding adherence to every single ceremony, even when it's clearly not adding value for this particular team or this specific product situation. The daily stand-up, for example, degrades into a tedious status report where everyone just stares at their shoes or tunes out, instead of being a quick sync focused on identifying and solving blockers.
Just going through the motions.
Exactly. Going through the motions without truly understanding the why behind the practice. This stiffness stops teams from adapting or even deciding to evolve or maybe even skip certain ceremonies when appropriate, which is actually part of real agility. It's like being permanently stuck in that shoe phase of learning, just rigidly following the rules without understanding or adaptation.
Shihari, right. What else?
Another big sign is what one source called fake autonomy or faultonomy. Companies might say their product teams are empowered and self-organizing, but then they place really tight prescriptive limits on how the team can actually do the work. They dictate the tools, the specific steps, removing any real decision-making power over the how.
So it looks like autonomy.
But it lacks any genuine empowerment. It's agility in name only.
And the concept of cargo culting also fits right in here, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. That's perhaps the most telling sign of Agile theater. It's when teams are diligently performing all the visible Agile rituals. They hold the stand-ups, they use the Kanban boards, they have retrospectives, they do the planning poker,
All the stuff.
all the stuff. They do all the visible motions, but without a deep shared understanding of why they're doing them or how these practices are actually intended to lead to better product or service outcomes for customers.
Like building mock runways, hoping planes will land.
Exactly like the cargo cults, building the form without grasping the underlying principles. Without understanding the why, the rituals become just empty gestures. They don't help. And sometimes they can actually hinder genuine progress and adaptation because they create friction and waste time.
Okay, so what are the real dangers then of falling into this trap of fake agile, this agile theater, especially for product and service management?
The consequences are pretty significant, according to the sources. You end up with frustrated and disengaged teams. People feel like Agile happened to them. They often believe it just makes their work harder, not better, because it's poorly implemented.
I've heard that before.
Right. It can also create this fundamental mismatch between the Agile framework being imposed and the actual nature of the work being done. Like maybe forcing a complex framework designed for new product development onto a team that's primarily doing routine operational support, where perhaps something simpler like Kanban would be a much better fit.
Using the wrong tool for the job.
Exactly. And critically, fake Agile allows that old traditional project management thinking, that linear, sequential, waterfall approach to just creep back in under disguise. Leaders start demanding detailed Gantt charts again. They micromanage the how of the work, completely clashing with the flexibility, trust, and iterative learning needed for complex product work.
So it's waterfall in agile clothing.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And if the people actually doing the product work don't see genuine benefits, if they feel things are just harder or more bureaucratic, they lose faith. And that leads to wasted time, wasted money, and ultimately failed transformations. The Agile practices themselves aren't necessarily bad, but they're rendered completely ineffective without the right mindset, the right context, and those foundational pillars we talked about. It just creates an illusion of agility, while fundamentally nothing has really changed in how work gets done or how decisions are made.
Okay, so bringing it all together, what does this actually mean? How does this widespread fake agile phenomenon actively mess things up when you try to introduce something as complex and uncertain as AI into your products or services?
Well, think about it. AI work itself is inherently complex, it's experimental by nature, and it absolutely demands speed and constant adaptation. These are exactly the things that real Agile for product management is designed to enable.
Right.
But fake Agile, Agile theater, does the complete opposite. It makes organizations slow, rigid, and inflexible. It creates massive roadblocks when they try to integrate AI into their offerings, regardless of how many Agile labels they stick on things.
And you mentioned a big red flag earlier, something the sources point to, that indicates you're probably stuck in fake agile for product work.
Yes, infrequent releases. If you're only releasing significant product updates every 6 months or even longer, that's a huge sign.
Why is that such a blocker for AI?
Because that lack of rapid iteration, that inability to get feedback quickly and adjust, is fundamentally incompatible with effective AI development. AI requires constant experimentation, testing in the real world, and rapid adaptation because the underlying technology itself is still evolving so incredibly fast. You simply cannot succeed with AI using a rigid long-term product plan that doesn't allow for frequent adjustment based on what you're learning.
It forces you back into that old way of thinking.
Exactly. It forces organizations, even if they don't realize it, back into that old waterfall project management mindset plan, execute linearly, just dressed up with some Agile terminology.
So the bottom line seems pretty stark from the sources we looked at. If organizations don't seriously address their underlying culture and make that shift from fake agile to a truly agile mindset for product and service management, they are very, very likely to struggle, maybe even fail completely, when attempting to implement AI successfully in their products and services.
Yeah, the foundations have to be right. In leading teams through this level of change, navigating the inherent uncertainty that comes with integrating something genuinely new like AI, it requires significant self-awareness from leaders. particularly around managing their own emotional state.
Back to the leader's role.
Definitely. The sources highlight the importance of recognizing your personal emotional triggers, things like feeling your status is threatened, or the presumption of failure. And a really big one, especially relevant here, ambiguity. Just that feeling of uncertainty, having an unclear or even contradictory path forward. That's a huge trigger for many people, especially with the unknown surrounding AI.
And the sources suggested this deep discomfort with ambiguity isn't new, right? It's kind of rooted in history.
Yeah, partly in centuries of command and control organizational structures, which got really formalized in that traditional waterfall project management thinking. It created this deep-seated, often unconscious perception that leaders must always have the answer. That certainty equals competence.
Right. The boss knows best.
Exactly. Under that old waterfall mindset, not having the answer wasn't just uncomfortable. It was often seen as a sign of failure. So leaders frequently felt immense pressure to pretend they knew more than they actually did, just to maintain that image of control.
So how does that play out in leadership styles?
Well, the sources draw this really sharp distinction between what they call unintelligent leadership and intelligent leadership. Unintelligent leadership, they say, really only operates effectively where there's certainty. When things get ambiguous, these leaders tend to shut down debate, they jump to give premature answers just to avoid looking unsure, and they often resort to blaming others when things inevitably go wrong because the answer was premature.
And that kills.
It kills curiosity, it kills innovation, and it completely destroys psychological safety, the very things you desperately need for effective agile product teams and for successfully navigating the complexities of AI.
And there was a really provocative warning in the material about those kinds of leadership roles, wasn't there?
Yes, a stark one. Those kinds of unintelligent leadership roles, the ones that are primarily predictable, programmable, focused on maintaining certainty, are the very roles most vulnerable to being automated or significantly augmented by AI in the future.
Oof. So what's the alternative? Intelligent leadership.
Exactly. Intelligent leadership, according to these sources, is about being genuinely comfortable with discovery. It's about having the courage to lead, even when you don't have all the answers. And crucially, it's about inviting the team into that space of co-discovery, reframing ambiguity not as a threat to be feared, but as a shared puzzle to be solved together. That deep human skill of navigating uncertainty collaboratively, that's the kind of leadership value AI simply cannot replicate.
Okay, that makes sense. The sources also strongly encourage learning to recognize your own personal emotional escalation patterns, right? It tells.
Yes, that self-awareness is absolutely key for leaders and really for everyone on the team. What happens to your voice when you get stressed or face uncertainty? Do you start interrupting people more? Does your language become more controlling, more binary, black and white? What physical cues do you notice? Does your jaw tighten? Do you start breathing more shallowly?
Knowing your own signs.
Right. These are the patterns you tend to fall into automatically under pressure. And the material points out that ambiguity itself often has linguistic nicks. Tells to like a sudden rush to binary, either thinking or making statements that prematurely close down exploration instead of inviting more questions.
So how do you actually navigate all this then, both for yourself as an individual and, as a team trying to work together through this stuff? The sources offered some really practical techniques, didn't they? It seems to come back to applying mindfulness, but in a very pragmatic way.
Absolutely. For individuals, the sources suggest some simple, accessible psychophysiological grounding techniques, things you can do in the moment to regulate your state, like box breathing, or just focusing on your breath for a minute to reset your nervous system.
Things you can do quickly.
Yeah, very quickly. Or making small physical shifts, like stretching or changing posture to release tension. Another powerful one is cognitive reframing, using that idea of name it to tame it. Simply putting a label on the emotion you're feeling, like, okay, I'm feeling anxious right now, which neuroscience suggests can actually reduce its intensity.
Naming it helps.
It does. Even having small environmental elements or little anchor objects on your desk that have personal meaning can help you reconnect to a desired, more resourceful state. And importantly, consciously scheduling in moments for recovery or reset throughout the day, tactical pauses, short rituals to decompress, even just a mindful walk between meetings.
Okay, those are great for individuals. What about for the team as a whole? Because the emotions are contagious, right? The sources provided some concrete, proven techniques for teams to manage their emotional states together. This seems like the bridge where AI might surface a signal, but the humans need tools to actually fix the dynamic.
Exactly. The sources highlighted 5 really practical techniques for teams.
Okay, let's hear them.
First, check-in rituals. Starting meetings with a very quick emotional check. It could be as simple as a Roman vote, thumbs up for doing great, sideways for okay meh, down for struggling. Takes literally seconds. Teams that do this consistently report significant boosts in meeting effectiveness because they acknowledge and address the collective mood right up front. More mature teams might add just a sentence of context, like sideways, feeling a bit worried about that dependency we discussed.
Simple but effective. Okay, what's second?
Second, mood boards. This could be a physical whiteboard in the team room or a simple digital tool where team members can silently register their general state, maybe using different colored sticky notes or simple icons at the start of a meeting or a work period. The real power here is in pattern recognition over time.
How so?
The team can collectively see, we consistently seem to dip in energy around 3 p.m., or that specific recurring planning meeting always seems to leave us feeling drained. This often reveals easy fixes like maybe rescheduling that meeting, changing its format, or building in a break.
Gotcha. Pattern spotting. Third.
Third, energy mapping. This involves assigning someone, maybe on a rotating basis, to simply track the perceived emotional energy shifts throughout a meeting. They can use simple visual cues, like drawing up or down arrows next to agenda items or on a timeline.
Tracking the flow.
Exactly. Over time, patterns emerge showing when the team is typically most engaged or when they clearly need a break or a change of pace. This allows the team to proactively adjust meeting structures or timing for better flow.
Okay. Fourth technique.
Fourth, pause protocols. This is about establishing a simple, blame-free way for anyone on the team to signal that things are going off track emotionally. Maybe it's a symbolic yellow card they can hold up, physically or virtually. The key is that anyone can call a brief pause if they notice the team is clearly dipping below, curious, or getting stuck in negativity.
And what happens in the pause?
Use that pause for a micro-recovery. Maybe everyone takes 3 deep breaths together, does a quick collective stretch, or maybe everyone shares one small positive thing that happened that day. It's about rebooting the energy quickly and preventing a downward spiral.
A quick reset. I like that. And the fifth one.
And fifth, reflection practices. Setting aside just a few minutes, maybe at the end of the day or the end of the week, for a brief personal or team reflection specifically on the emotional flow of the work. Asking questions like, when were we really at our best today? When did we seem to struggle or get stuck? Documenting these patterns helps the team build a shared playbook, a collective understanding of how they best manage their collective emotional capacity.
Building their own playbook. Nice.
And the sources are really clear. These shouldn't be positioned or thought of as soft skills that are nice to have. They're essential performance tools. It's about actively optimizing the team's emotional capacity, which directly impacts their ability to solve problems, collaborate, innovate, and ultimately deliver value through their product or service.
So it's core to performance.
Absolutely. These practices empower the humans on the team to interpret the signals AI might provide about team state and then take effective, targeted action. Teams that master managing their collective state consistently outperform those that ignore it or leave it to chance.
Okay, so we've covered emotions, the foundations, the pitfalls of fake agile. How do you actually fix it? How do you move from that state of fake agile, of agile theater, and get to real effective agility in your product and service management? The sources offered a path forward, right?
They did, and it's grounded in practicality. Step 1 is recognition. This isn't about blindly following some new checklist. It's about genuine, honest inquiry. Ask the teams, are the current ways of working actually benefiting you and delivering value through the product or service? Look hard at the real outcomes. Are you seeing faster delivery of valuable increments? Is customer satisfaction genuinely improving? Is product quality getting better? If the answers are murky or maybe even negative, you have to listen to that feedback honestly.
A reality check first. Okay, step 2.
Step 2, shift focus. Get the organization's attention away from an obsession with process compliance and framework rigidity. Stop asking, are we doing Scrum right? And start asking, are we delivering valuable outcomes for our customers effectively? Shift the focus intensely onto outcomes. Frameworks are just tools. They are a means to an end, not the end itself.
Focus on outcomes, not process for process sake.
Exactly. Be genuinely open to finding better ways, to tailoring the approach to your specific product, your specific team, your specific context. That's moving into the Ha phase of Shuhari, adapting the form, because you understand the principles. Start measuring business impact and genuine agility, not just whether teams ticked all the boxes on a framework compliance checklist.
Makes sense. And step 3.
Step 3, truly empower teams. This is maybe the most critical and often the hardest for traditional organizations. You have to give the product teams real decision-making power over the how they plan and execute the work to achieve the product vision set by leadership.
So leadership sets the what and why.
Precisely. Leadership's role becomes crystal clear on the what, the vision, the desired outcomes, the strategic goals, and the why, the customer needs, the business rationale. But then they must genuinely trust the team, the people closest to the work, to figure out the best how. Self-organization isn't chaos. It's about teams operating effectively within clear boundaries and towards clear goals.
But that requires letting go.
It absolutely requires leaders to actively let go of excessive control and those ingrained waterfall project management habits of dictating tasks and timelines. It demands a fundamental shift in leadership style, from director to enabler, from controller to coach, to truly leverage the collective intelligence and expertise of the team. And when teams own the how, they become genuinely accountable for the results.
And as the sources kept coming back to getting this right, making that move from fake to real agility in product and service management, it always loops back to getting those fundamentals solid first, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Building on that bedrock of context, mindfulness, respect, and trust. If any one of those pillars is weak or crumbling, the entire structure you're trying to build on top, whether it's your agile practices, your team's emotional health, or your ability to integrate AI successfully into your products, the whole thing is inherently shaky. You got to fix the foundation.
Wow, okay. This deep dive has really given us, and hopefully you listening, a lot to consider. It pulls together so many seemingly separate threads, doesn't it? Highlighting just how deeply interconnected our individual feelings, our collective emotional states, the underlying organizational culture, the leadership style being practiced, and ultimately the success of something as complex and challenging as bringing AI effectively into our products and services truly are.
Indeed. It makes it really clear that the challenges often aren't with the core principles of Agile itself, but with how it gets superficially applied and maybe poorly implemented within existing organizational structures and mindsets, particularly when we're talking about managing products and services in complex environments.
So for you, our listener, does any of this resonate? Does it sound familiar? Have you maybe encountered that kind of agile theater in your product work?
Yeah.
Have you felt the tangible impact of a team's collective mood shifting, for better or worse? Or found yourself navigating that tricky ambiguity that comes with innovation, maybe specifically with AI projects? It really makes you pause and think about where the real leverage points are for building truly high-performing teams and successful, adaptable products in the future, doesn't it?
It really does. And as you reflect on all this, maybe consider this provocative thought that was shared in some of the source material we reviewed. What is one single, small, concrete step you could potentially take, maybe even starting today, to actively strengthen just one of those four foundational pillars we discussed: context, mindfulness, respect, or trust in your own work environment, especially keeping in mind that future where AI is likely to be increasingly integrated into what you do, just one small step.
That's a powerful question to sit with. What's one small step? If you are interested in exploring these ideas further, maybe digging deeper into the specific models or techniques we touched on, and diving into the actual source videos that informed our conversation today, you'll find links to all of them waiting for you in the description below this deep dive. There's definitely more great insight there waiting for you to continue your own exploration.